Well, happy Halloween, everybody. I really got a treat for you with this episode. I was racking my brains around what would be a good Halloween movie to revisit or review. You got your classics. You know, the ones everyone remembers, like Casper, Hocus Pocus, Nightmare Before Christmas, or the various Scooby Doo movies. Scooby Doo and the Reluctant Werewolf is a personal favorite of mine, but I'm also one of those red shirt Shaggy fans. Anyways, I thought about all of those, but I really wanted to get something out of the vault, a real hidden pumpkin. Well, I found that hidden pumpkin. In fact, I've never seen this film before now. I really regret that because I know I would have absolutely loved this as a kid. The movie I'm talking about is, of course, The Halloween Tree. The Halloween Tree is based on a book by Ray Bradbury, and this was not a movie I was expecting out of a Halloween TV special produced by none other than Hanna-Barbera in 1993 for Cartoon Network. You see, this movie oozes with spooky vibes right out of the gate with the opening credits, and it had music that felt like it came straight from legendary composers such as Danny Elfman or James Horner. And the art, man, the art immediately sets an otherworldly tone. And the music actually was made by John Debney, an accomplished composer by his own right that really invoked what you'd hear from movies such as Nightmare Before Christmas or Batman's animated series. And you see, the movie starts out with Ray Bradbury as the narrator of this adventure. He goes on to describe four friends are shown at their respective homes, donning costumes excitedly. You see Jenny as a witch, Ralph as a mummy, Wally as a monster, and Tom Skelton as a skeleton. I guess they didn't get too creative with his last name. Anyways, they plan to meet up with their best friend Pipkin, but he doesn't show up. They decide to go to Pip's house, and what do they find? Well, they find him being loaded into an ambulance with his parents riding along with him. He has written them a note explaining that he is going to the hospital for emergency surgery and that they should celebrate without him. They feel they cannot start Halloween without him, so they follow the ambulance to visit him at the hospital. And you see, this movie, for being a children's film, does not shy away from the heavier topics right from the get-go. You see the guy that all these kids look up to as their de facto leader is on a stretcher being put into an ambulance for emergency surgery. The idea of death is slapped right into their faces, right at the start of the movie. And, you know, I love how much they legitimately care for their friend. That is just one of the biggest themes you'll see in this movie going forward. If I'm a sucker for anything, well, it's a movie involving friends that never abandon each other and care for one another. This movie has some real heart at the core of it. Alright, let's get back to the story. You see, we got this Tom fella that I mentioned before. Well, he basically takes over as leader while Pip is not with them, and he suggests a shortcut through the spooky woods. And when they do that, they see what looks like a translucent Pip running along the ravine trail, and Tom leads them on, convinced that Pip has designed an elaborate hoax for them. And it makes sense from what they've talked about Pip. It seemed like he was one of those prankster type of leaders that knew how to have fun with his friends. And so with that, the group races on after Pip, who then disappears nearing a towering and darkened mansion. Now, I gotta say, this mansion is the perfect embodiment of an old haunted looking mansion. You got the immediate gothic architecture overtones, the creaking, dilapidated wooden steps, and the creepy door knocker. It really brings you back to everything that reminds you of an old Halloween movie. When they knock on that door knocker, a man named Carapace Clavicle Moundshroud answers the door, and he's voiced by none other than Leonard Nimoy. That's right, the Leonard Nimoy known for Spock. And he doesn't even sound like himself. Like, if you were to watch this movie and you didn't see who did the voices and someone told you that he was doing the voice, no one would believe you. He does such an awesome job in this role. So once Moundshroud invites them inside, he expresses disappointment that none of the children know what their costumes symbolize. He reveals that he is after the ghost of Pip. You see, Pip he seeks to steal a pumpkin with the face carved into it from Moundshroud's Halloween tree of jack-o'-lanterns. Ah, yes, we finally get to see what the movie and the book is all based around. This tree that is the absolute epitome of Halloween. You see, the idea of the tree was actually a part of a weekly Sunday painting routine of Bradbury's, where one day he painted a certain tree a Halloween tree. You see, this occurred during the air date of Charlie Brown's Halloween special back in 1963. And once Ray Bradbury and his entire family watched it, they hated it so much that he contacted none other than Chuck Jones. And once he contacted him, Bradbury and Jones decided to make their own Halloween special. They decided they should make Halloween proper. Bradbury then showed Chuck Jones the painting of the Halloween tree and immediately struck the chord for the two. This is the definition of Halloween in a picture. This then progressed the story of the Halloween tree, which, as we know, they originally intended this to be a screenplay, but it eventually ended up being a novel in 1972. Even though that Bradbury wanted to work alongside with Jones, it just never worked out. So Bradbury ended up teaming up with none other than Hanna-Barbera to produce the film in 1993. The interesting thing is it doesn't even look or sound like something Hanna-Barbera would make. The animation is not their usual style, and you don't hear anything like their usual famous sound effects. There's nothing else to remind you that Hanna-Barbera made this throughout the entire film. You see, there are plenty of videos you can watch explaining the animation process of Hanna-Barbera, but to get to the gist of it, it is that they usually recycled a lot of scenes and sounds to make their shows very cost efficient to make, which is why it was so surprising that the animation in this movie is pretty full and well done. Not something you would expect from Hanna-Barbera. It's not a feature film quality unlike their Once Upon a Forest movie that had released earlier this year. Although, I must say, I would not recommend watching that other movie. Halloween Tree is the far more superior movie between those two. This TV special was more up to par with the TV shows that Disney and Warner Brothers were doing at the time. And maybe after being bought by Turner in the early 1990s, Hanna-Barbera began to get higher budgets to work with. Now that's just speculation on my part, and the interesting thing about all this is that most people wouldn't notice. This movie was animated overseas by Hanna-Barbera's Philippines-based satellite studio known as Phil Cartoons. It was established in 1987 by Hanna-Barbera, specifically by Jerry Smith. You might have recalled me mentioning him in one of my most recent videos. Phil Cartoons definitely has an interesting assortment of different shows that they have worked on. And one of them I have thought about talking about, which was Fish Police. A lot of people have already talked about it, but who knows, I might dive into it. It's a pretty weird show. Maybe you should check out some of these other YouTubers and see what they've had to say about it. And then hopefully you'll come back to me if I ever decide to jump in on that train. All right, let me get back on track with the story so I can stop gushing about the backstory. I know you don't care to hear me for over 30 minutes. I see my YouTube analytics. So back to the story. After the kids see the Halloween tree for the first time, Tom begs Moundshroud to let them come with him and help him bring back Pip. Moundshroud initially refuses but relents. If they can keep up with him before dawn, then they might be able to retrieve the pumpkin and get Pip back, while also going on a scavenger hunt of sorts to learn about the significance of their costumes and the origins of Halloween. They begin their pursuit of Pip by traveling back in time by ripping down old circus posters from a nearby barn, crafting a giant kite with the kids hanging on as a weighted tail. So as I stated previously, they go on this epic journey where they travel to 4 different locations, each educating about the history of the Halloween character they represent. And with each location, you get this really nice, intimate moment for the character that represents the location with Pipkin, where they remind him why he matters so much to them and trying to convince him to stay with them. But each time, Pip runs away to each different location in which they chase after him along with Moundshroud. And you see, the reason Pip keeps running away, it's because the pumpkin actually represented his soul, and Moundshroud was meant to represent the devil. You don't get the full context of that in the movie, but it definitely shows it a lot more in the book. You see, Pip would not accept his fate that was given to him. He would not accept death. And it's really nice seeing the lengths of which his friends will go because they understand they are losing their friend and they are going to do everything they can to save him. And so finally, everything comes to a head and they make it to the last location, which is Mexico, where they learn about the significance of skeletons during Dia de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead festival. They find a very weak Pip in a catacomb. And this is the last location, so of course the temporary leader is the last one to go. And Tom, he manages to get to Pip and he apologizes to him. He admits that he feels guilty for the whole ordeal because he once wished for something bad to happen to Pip so he could lead the group for once. And Pip smiles at him and he forgives him, promising to let him lead anytime he wants. And after that touching moment, Pip's spirit crumbles into dust and is gone. And so Moundshroud tells the children they did not make it in time, and Pip is now his property. The children offer him a year from the end of each of their lives in exchange for Pip's return. He accepts the deal and gives each of them a piece of a sugar candy skull, with Pip's name on it and to eat, sealing the bargain. Pip's spirit then revives and he snatches his pumpkin back from Moundshroud and flies out. Now, you have to be soulless or Mr. Moundshroud himself if you did not find this final scene to be touching. How many of you can say that you have at least one friend, let alone four, that are willing to sacrifice 1 year of their life to save their friend's soul? Now, many would say, of course, it's just a year. But it's a sacrifice you do not realize until the decision arrives, and not everyone would be so quick to say yes. And so, this movie does a fantastic job of showing what it means to be a true friend while plucking the heartstrings of the viewers. And I hope that it reminds them to be thankful of the people that supports and cares about them. So in conclusion, the animation was a grade above most things that Hanna-Barbera has made, and definitely has some rich backgrounds that people would love to even display on their wall at home. The tone and sound of the movie fits Halloween perfectly, and it had a story that really did have depth for a TV special for Cartoon Network, while still being able to fulfill Ray Bradbury's wish to make a movie that is the definition of Halloween. I really enjoyed this film, and even though I finally just watched it as an adult, I can honestly say that it's probably one of my top 5 favorite Halloween movies. And that says a lot because a lot of movies that came out in the 90s were the staples to this day of Halloween films. Like I have mentioned before, we have Hocus Pocus, we have Nightmare Before Christmas, and there's plenty of others that I could list. And interesting enough, Hocus Pocus actually came out the same year as the Halloween tree. And there's one more fun fact about this film that I get to tell you. It's being produced into a live action film by Warner Brothers. And I know what you're thinking. A lot of times when this stuff gets produced into live action, it doesn't translate very well. But I'm really hoping that they honor the book, the movie, and obviously the author. I hope they understand why this became a cult classic. I hope they understand the essence of this film and the book. I hope that they know that this movie needs to be like it. It needs to capture what the animated movie got right, so that way they can properly honor Ray Bradbury. Make sure to keep the friendship at the heart of it while also understanding that you have to keep the essence of Halloween pure. Thanks everybody for watching and listening, and as I always say, thank you so much for letting me get to the root of my geek culture with you.